Adar, I also want to understand where things currently stand as far as the Omicron variant is concerned. Various vaccine manufacturers, including AstraZeneca, are looking at the data, assessing whether this is in fact going to escape vaccine immunity or not, and whether there is any need to tweak the vaccine. Moderna is the only one who has specifically spoken about needing to tweak the vaccine. What is the latest that you're hearing on that front? What is the guidance coming in from AstraZeneca on being able to deal with the Omicron challenge?
So right now, firstly, there's no reason to believe that we won't have a decent level of protection if you're double vaccinated with all these mutant variants, whether it's Delta, Omicron. I mean, look at the data we had with Lancet on Delta. We had 81% efficacy with the AstraZeneca vaccine, Covishield. So, I don't know why the Moderna CEO decided to make such a statement so early on without having data. Sometimes these kind of statements can create unnecessary worry and panic. What we've heard so far is that the new mutant variant of concern is not so bad in terms of causing severe disease. Of course, that can change in a few months. We've seen nobody should make any predictions on any matter with regards to this virus unless you have proper data to back it up, because things keep changing every few months. With regards to your question, Oxford is working on a new improved version of Covishield, Vaxzevria, the AstraZeneca vaccine, to directly target Omicron. And we don't still see the need to launch such a vaccine, but we may start stockpiling at risk a small quantity of this if the need arises. Let me just clarify, and we'll know that in a few months. In case, in a few months, we get to know that the current vaccines are not as effective. But there's no reason at all right now to believe that the current vaccines are not effective. In fact, you can see, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine has actually worked pretty well compared to the messenger RNA vaccines. Look at what's happening in Germany, parts of Europe and the US. So initially, we thought messenger RNA would give you a very high level of protection, but everyone is boosting in those countries, taking 3 doses, to ensure that you have a high level of protection. Whereas we've seen in India, the Indian experts have said that the level of protection is very good with the current vaccine.
Right. And of course, this is a matter that is currently under examination and assessment. So if you dial down production as far as Covishield is concerned, what are you going to be able to use that capacity for? Is there a plan now in place? Is there visibility on what that capacity is likely to be used for?
I would have loved to use that capacity for all the other vaccines that I wanted to launch. But for me, I want to be a little careful and prudent and keep that excess capacity, which we invested in and worked very hard to build, just in case our nation needs suddenly a huge amount of stock again come February, March. And I'm saying this consciously. I hope it never happens. I hope we don't need it. But I don't want to, at least for the next 6 months, again, get into a situation where we can't provide vaccines because we've moved on and assumed that the pandemic is over and we get on to our, new products.
Right. Yes, I would imagine that you will wait to hear from the government on whether there is any need for more orders, or whether they are placing more orders if, in fact, they do decide to go forward with a booster strategy. Adar, before I let you go, given where we are today in terms of visibility of supply as well as what your order book looks like, the expectation or the assumption that production will have to be hiked considerably, that you will need to add more capacity, that doesn't seem to be the case today, even though the world is continuing to see significant vaccine inequity. I mean, it sounds strange and bizarre, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. But don't forget the population that you're trying to cover in the African continent, Indian subcontinent, and India. It was always going to happen that way, that the supply will outstrip the absorption capacity for these countries on a monthly basis. Yes, there is still demand, but that demand, for it to be taken up in these countries, takes a lot of infrastructure and time. All these other nations can't vaccinate at 7 and 8 million beneficiaries a day like India has done. They don't have that level of infrastructure. They're building it, they're strengthening it, and hopefully by this time next year, they will have also reached a 60-70% double vaccinated target. And it's not because there's a shortage of vaccine supply, it's because of infrastructure and other factors.
Okay, outside of COVID, now that you have a little bit of breathing space as well as production capacity, anything else that you're going to be working on? Are there anything on the horizon?
Yes, we're very excited to launch our malaria vaccine in about a year and a half, which we've been working, and the trials have been on in Africa. And this is again in partnership with Oxford. Malaria as a disease, claims more lives than most other diseases in the world. And we really want to make an impact there. And we've got that, and we've got our HPV vaccine, which is to prevent cervical cancer in women, which is again another major issue in a lot of these nations. And we've got a robust pipeline over the next 4 to 5 years, including a pentavalent meningitis vaccine, a solution for dengue, which got again derailed because of the COVID crisis. We had to use that facility as well for our dengue monoclonal antibody. And we've got other monoclonal antibodies that we're going to work on with our partnership with Biocon as well, that we talked about earlier. So there's a lot to do post-COVID, and I can't wait to get back to that, because there's a need for that as well in the world.
Well, Adar, we wish you the very best of luck, and I would imagine that once you hear from the government, I would, on a booster, it might give you more clarity on what happens as far as the current capacity is concerned, and of course the emergency use listing application that will be taken up by the WHO for Covax. But always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV18. Appreciate your time. That is Serum Institute's Adar Poonawalla saying that they will be cutting production capacity for Covishield by about 50% in about a week's time, because at this point in time, at 250 million doses a month, demand is not being able to keep pace with supply. Supply is far higher than demand. We will take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We talk more when we return.